Hello and welcome to South Scenics. This is the first episode in a series as I attempt to model the South Devon Railway. The focus of this video will be baseboards and terrain. This 9mm plywood is 122cm by 61cm, so approximately 4 feet by 2 feet. Although my intention is to make a large layout, I'm treating each module as a separate diorama. After drilling and countersinking holes in the plywood, I can start on the framework. An electric circular saw would make this much easier, but I quite enjoy using the hand tools. A tenon saw isn't quite as accurate as an electric saw, but it does the job. With the outer framework cut, I can screw it to the plywood. As this is the first board I'm making, I'm not using wood glue at this stage. The outer framework is screwed together, but there's still quite a bit of flexibility in the module. Diagonal bracing would offer the most strength, but as the module's only quite small, 2 pieces across the width were plenty. Before they were fixed in place, I took the opportunity to drill some holes for the electrics. Once I've checked they fit correctly, I can mark out the holes for the screws. And a final check to make sure it's square. I've used a countersink on all of the drill holes to ensure the screw heads are level with the wood. The space I'm working in is very limited, so I couldn't really work on anything bigger at one time. I was very pleased at the end to have only 2 very small pieces of waste. I mentioned in the announcement video which sections I'm trying to do, and I've been giving a bit more thought to how I'm going to do it. I decided to look at Google Maps and then create a grid to see how much I could fit on each board. These 2 rectangles represent 2 module boards, and I'm sticking some clear plastic over the top. To get to this stage, I had to calculate the size of my boards in 1:76 scale, the real life size, and also the scales available on Google Maps. After marking out the grid lines, I also measured out what represents 20 metres on the screen. Although Google Maps isn't the most accurate way of measuring for many reasons, it was really useful to give me an idea of what I could fit on each board. I'll make a final decision on each board as I get to it, but the curve at Totnes is going to be a slight problem. It looks like the final board will need to be slightly deeper to fit in everything I need. And this is my first attempt at transferring the grids onto the main board. To refine this method, I picked up some transparent graph paper which should help with the accuracy. I found 3 useful scales on Google Maps, so marked out the graph paper accordingly. As before, I can just move the grid around on the screen to see what works. And you'll see from the close-up video that the additional grids will help with the accuracy. My final attempt was to import the map into Keynote, which is an Apple version of PowerPoint. I calculated the size of the grids and then created 3 boards. Once highlighted, I could move them where I wanted them and also rotate the map if required. Due to the difference in terrain and also the direction of the track, I realised I'd need several joining boards. These boards will help with the transition and shouldn't need to be any longer than 2 feet or 60 centimetres. I decided to start with this section at Dartington because it gives me the most flexibility. It's one piece of track through some scenery, so arguably the easiest section. I need to make lots of trees, some bushes, and also there's a huge resin pool. This is the one section where the overhead picture is fairly useless. I'll need to use the photos and videos I have, and also there are some really good videos on YouTube showing the train driver's view. Now, nothing is flat in Devon, so I'm going to be raising the track to build the terrain around it at higher and lower levels. There's a slight curve in the track at Dartington, so I'm just going over my pencil mark with a black marker pen. The masking tape and a new blade in the jigsaw should minimise the amount of splitting on the plywood. Two lengths of timber are cut and then marked out ready for the screw holes. After countersinking, the plywood can be screwed to the timber supports. And then the raised section is attached to the main baseboard. My favoured option for building up terrain is to use insulation board. I picked this up from my local builder's merchant and just needed to peel off the silver foil. I managed to pick up some board which was 7 centimetres thick, and this matches the timber I used to raise the tracks. If this was polystyrene, I'd be able to use a hot foam knife to cut through it. As it is, it's far too dense. The old bread knife usually works for me. Gorilla wood glue is spread over the insulation board ready for sticking down. I'd broken the nozzle on the bottle, so it ended up being quite messy. When I was happy with the position, I put some weights down and left it overnight to dry. The lower section just jammed in quite snugly, so I didn't need any weights there. I needed some more height at the back, so I just needed to glue on one more piece. When everything was fully dry, I started to carve the landscape with a sharp knife. To tidy up and protect the edges of the module, I'm just using 6mm MDF. It has a nice smooth finish and it's really easy to cut. The front and the back are fairly straightforward rectangular cuts. Once those are screwed into place, I can measure out the trickier side sections. After the sections have been cut out with a jigsaw, I can sand down the rough edges and then screw them into place. and it's also worth adding some wood glue to keep everything together. To build up the land, I like to use Sculptamold. I've previously used Moldacine from Woodland Scenics and also Fibermold from WWS, which are both great products. The working time of Sculptamold isn't very long, so I'm just doing small sections at a time. After it's been done for a few minutes, you can start to spray it with some water and then smooth out the rough sections. I'm just adding a thin layer here for the riverbed, and then I'm building it up slightly for the bank at the front. Depending on conditions, the Sculptamold can sometimes take a few days to fully dry. And now is a good opportunity to cover the screw holes with some polyfiller. I left it to dry overnight and sanded it down the following morning. This is a very cheap brown acrylic paint, and I'm just going to water it down slightly to make it go further. This base layer is really important as it stops the white Sculptamold showing through. While I wait for the brown paint to dry, I'm giving the MDF a base layer of black paint. This is Woodland Scenics Olive Drab Water Undercoat. This seals the base and minimises the risk of resin leaking. Before I use the earth texture, I need to mark out the position of the track with this cork underlay. As there's a slight curve, I need to use some pins to hold it in position. There is plenty of clearance space, but I just double checked with an old GWR coach. When I was happy with the position, I marked it with pencil ready for gluing. There's a timber support running underneath this, so I need to mark a place where I can drill the holes for the dropper wires. To fix the cork in place, I'm using Woodland Scenics Scenic Glue, but any sort of PVA would work. To stop it moving while the glue dries, I'm just pinning it in place and then weighing it down with some ballast jars. Now it's time to add the earth texture. Working in small sections, the matte Mod Podge is brushed on. The earth texture I use is a mixture of Woodland Scenics Fine Turf Earth and brown tile grout. The great thing about working in small freestanding sections is the ability to move them at your convenience. Something I'm asked quite regularly is why I spray this texture with soapy water. A fine misting of this helps to hold the texture in place and also breaks the surface tension. When it comes to spraying the scenic glue like I'm doing here, it helps it to soak in rather than bead on top of the texture. It's quite wet, so it's left for 24 hours to dry. I'm not laying any track yet, but I wanted to drill the holes for the dropper wires. Before I can think about pouring any resin, I need to add some details to the riverbed. This is dead thyme from my garden, which I love to use as it gives a really nice effect. For the shallow areas of the river, I'm using different types of ballast and stones. I keep adding stones until I get the desired effect. I'm hoping to add a thin layer of murky resin to give the effect of deep water in the main section. This scatter represents broken twigs and debris. Then it just needs a small amount of green fine turf. And as before, a spray of soapy water to hold everything in place, and a thorough soaking of scenic glue to hold all of the stones in place. I'll need to leave that to dry thoroughly before I can think about adding the resin. So this is my progress so far. I haven't attached the track yet because I need to give it some more thought, but I do have some railway sleepers here from DCC Concepts which will help with the join of the boards. This entire area will be covered with trees, so I picked up a box from Gaugemaster here, and also I grew some from seed last year, so I've got an entire carrier bag full of seed foam, so I'll be using some of those as well. There's plenty to cover this area, so that should be absolutely fine. This area and this bank will be covered in grass and bushes, and then some will be placed along here as well, and then this section will be covered in resin. So I've got several boxes of this Woodland Scenics deep pour. Because I'm familiar with it, I thought that was the best one to go for. And then it'll be on to the next module. If you like the videos, please remember to like and subscribe, as it really helps me to grow the channel. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.